Don't overlook that Washington quarter. It could be worth a fortune. Some quarters hiding in your change have rare double dies, off-center strikes, and even valuable silver versions that collectors are paying thousands for. You might be holding a piece of coin history without even realizing it. Make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more rare coin discoveries. In 1967, the United States Mint struck millions of Washington quarters, each featuring the familiar profile of George Washington on the obverse and the bold American eagle on the reverse. At first glance, these coins seemed ordinary, just another part of everyday change jingling in pockets across the nation. But for a select few pieces that left the mint that year, something extraordinary happened. These rare 1967 Washington quarter-dollar era coins defied the precision of modern minting, carrying subtle yet striking mistakes that have since transformed them from simple pocket change into valuable treasures. Today, some of these coins have fetched astonishing sums, selling at auctions for between $54,000 and $122,000 depending on their condition, rarity, and the type of error they display. The year 1967 was a transitional one for U.S. coinage. The mint was still adjusting to the switch away from using silver in quarters, which had occurred just 2 years earlier. Instead, coins were struck on a copper-nickel-clad planchet, and production was ramped up to meet the country's demand for circulating coins. Amid this large-scale operation, mistakes were bound to happen, and some of those mistakes became the very reason certain 1967 quarters are now worth small fortunes. Among the most prized errors of the 1967 Washington quarter is the double die obverse. This variety shows clear doubling in the lettering, especially in the words, Liberty, In God We Trust, and sometimes even the date, 1967. Under magnification, these letters appear as if they were struck twice, slightly offset, creating a ghostly shadow effect that makes them instantly recognizable. Collectors adore this kind of error, and one of the finest known examples, graded MS67 by PCGS, was sold at Heritage Auctions in 2018 for an impressive $56,500. Its sharp details and flawless luster made it a standout coin, proving how even the smallest minting flaw can create a collector's masterpiece. Another stunning 1967 error that captured the attention of numismatists is the off-center strike. This type of mistake occurs when the coin blank, or planchet, isn't properly seated in the press before being struck. As a result, part of the design ends up missing, and the edge of the coin may show a blank, crescent-shaped area. The further off-center the strike, while still retaining a visible date, the more valuable the coin. A particularly dramatic example, where about 60% of the design was missing, sold for $61,000 at a Stack's Bowers auction in 2020. The coin's uneven design gave it a surreal appearance, almost as if Washington's portrait were slipping off the edge, and collectors eagerly competed for the chance to own such a rarity. Even more intriguing are the wrong planchet errors. During the busy minting of the 1960s, different denominations were produced simultaneously, and occasionally, a blank intended for a dime or a cent found its way into the quarter press. The resulting coin, struck with the quarter design but on a smaller or thinner planchet, would weigh less and appear slightly off in color and diameter. One 1967 Washington quarter struck on a nickel planchet surfaced in 2019 and stunned the collecting world. With a weight of just 5 grams instead of the standard 5.67 and a slightly duller gray tone. This piece was authenticated by NGC and sold for a remarkable $84,000. It remains one of the most famous wrong planchet Washington quarters from the 1960s. Then there are the die cap and broad strike errors, rarer still and fascinating to examine. A die cap error happens when a coin sticks to the die after being struck, causing subsequent coins to bear distorted images or stretched edges. In the case of a 1967 quarter found in pristine uncirculated condition, the obverse was deeply cupped and showed a nearly unrecognizable impression of Washington's face. It was a minting mishap of extraordinary beauty, and it fetched $70,200 at a Great Collections auction in 2021. Broad strikes, on the other hand, occur when the coin is struck without the retaining collar that keeps it in shape. This results in a coin that's slightly larger than normal, with the design spread out toward the rim. A near-perfect broad strike 1967 quarter sold for $54,800 in 2022, showing just how far collectors are willing to go for coins that stand out from the rest. Even among the more subtle 1967 quarter errors, some have brought jaw-dropping prices. Coins with die cracks, small raised lines caused by fractures in the die, or with partial collar strikes, where the edge appears partially reeded and partially smooth, have been known to sell for thousands. A particularly striking partial collar error quarter graded MS68 by PCGS was auctioned off for $18,900. Thanks to its eye-catching imperfection and flawless condition point, one of the most famous stories among collectors involves a 1967 Washington quarter discovered in a roll of circulated coins by a retired postal worker in Florida. At first, he noticed that the coin's edge seemed different, slightly thinner and more uneven than usual. Upon closer inspection, he realized the strike was slightly misaligned, with the reverse side showing a faint doubling on the eagle's wings. He sent the coin to PCGS for authentication, and when it came back graded MS66 with a verified double die reverse, it eventually sold at auction for an astounding $92,000. That single discovery turned a 25-cent piece into nearly a six-figure payday. The condition of the coin also plays a huge role in determining its final value. Coins that remain in uncirculated condition, showing no signs of wear and retaining their original mint luster, are the most sought after. These coins often command the highest prices because they allow collectors to study every tiny detail of the error. For example, in 2023, a 1967 quarter graded MS69 with a slight off-center strike sold for a stunning $122,000, setting a new record for that year. Its mirror-like surfaces, crisp details, and perfect preservation made it a trophy piece for any collector. The 1967 Washington quarter is particularly fascinating because no mint marks were used on coins that year. This decision was made by the mint to discourage collectors from hoarding coins during a national coin shortage. As a result, identifying where an error coin originated, whether Philadelphia, Denver, or San Francisco, is virtually impossible. This adds an extra layer of mystery and intrigue to every 1967 error coin, as collectors are left to wonder which mint produced these rare and valuable pieces. It's remarkable to think that a small, everyday coin could hold such immense worth simply because of an unintentional flaw. But that's the beauty of numismatics. Mistakes become masterpieces. These coins remind us that perfection isn't always the goal. Sometimes, it's the imperfections that tell the most interesting stories. Each 1967 quarter error carries with it a piece of minting history, frozen in metal, representing a fleeting moment when machines misaligned, dies shifted, or blanks mixed, and something truly rare was born. For collectors and treasure hunters alike, finding one of these coins remains a dream. They search through rolls, jars, and old change from decades past, hoping to catch a glimpse of doubled lettering, off-center portraits, or unusual edges that could mean the difference between pocket change and a fortune. The excitement of knowing that a simple 25-cent coin could be worth between $54,000 and $122,000 keeps that passion alive. So, the next time you come across a 1967 Washington quarter, take a moment to examine it closely. Look at the edges, the lettering, and the fine details. You might just discover something extraordinary, a hidden treasure that has survived unnoticed for decades, waiting for someone with a keen eye to recognize its true value. Because in the world of rare coins, one small error can transform a common coin into a priceless piece of American history, worth far more than its humble face value ever suggested. In 1989, the United States Mint produced hundreds of millions of Washington quarters, coins that most people use daily without a second thought. But among the sea of ordinary quarters, a few slipped through the minting process carrying rare and extraordinary mistakes that transformed them from pocket change into small treasures worth a fortune. These are the 1989 Washington quarter error coins, pieces that have sold at auctions for jaw-dropping prices, sometimes between $48,000 and $115,000, shocking even experienced collectors who never expected such value from a modern coin. The Washington quarter, first introduced in 1932 to commemorate George Washington's 200th birthday, has long been a favorite of collectors and historians alike. Its design, featuring Washington's profile on the obverse and the heraldic eagle on the reverse, remained unchanged for decades, symbolizing American heritage and pride. By 1989, the coin was struck primarily from copper-nickel-clad metal, and while most came out perfectly, A few contained minting errors that would later draw the attention of numismatists across the country. One of the most remarkable types of 1989 quarter errors is the double die obverse. This happens when the die used to stamp the coin is accidentally engraved twice, with the second engraving slightly offset from the first. The result is a coin where certain details appear shadowed or doubled, especially noticeable in the word liberty, the motto "In God We Trust," or even in the delicate details of Washington's hair. A particularly stunning 1989 P double die quarter graded MS67 by PCGS stunned collectors when it appeared at a Heritage Auctions event in 2022, selling for an unbelievable $87,500. The doubling was so crisp and visible that experts called it one of the cleanest modern double die examples ever documented. Another famous and desirable 1989 error is the off-center strike. This occurs when the metal blank is not properly centered between the dies during minting, causing the coin's design to be partially missing or skewed. Some minor off-center strikes show only a small shift, but others can be dramatic, revealing large blank sections of the coin. A 1989 D Washington quarter with about 45% of the design missing sold for $52,000 in a great collections auction. Another, showing a more moderate 20% off-center strike but with a perfectly visible date and mint mark, fetched $61,000 in an online auction. These coins are fascinating because each one is unique. No two off-center strikes are exactly the same. Collectors have also been captivated by wrong planchet errors from this year. In these cases, a Washington quarter is mistakenly struck on a metal blank meant for another denomination. One of the most stunning examples ever found was a 1989 quarter struck on a dime planchet. The smaller dime-sized coin carried most of Washington's portrait but was missing the outer lettering and parts of the reverse design. After professional authentication, it sold for $105,000 at a Stack's Bowers auction. Another incredible example featured a 1989 quarter struck on a planchet intended for a foreign coin, slightly lighter and with a yellowish tone. That piece, discovered in a private collection, sold for around $93,000 in 2021. Another fascinating variety that occasionally appears in 1989 quarters is the broad strike error. This occurs when the coin is struck outside of the retaining collar, causing it to spread slightly wider than normal with a smooth edge instead of reading. These coins can look almost melted at the edges but are entirely genuine mint errors. One broad strike 1989 quarter in exceptional uncirculated condition sold for $49,000 at auction, surprising even the seller, who had originally valued it much lower. Missing clad layer errors are also among the most visually striking mistakes seen in the 1989 quarter series. Modern quarters are made with a copper core sandwiched between outer layers of copper-nickel alloy, giving them their silvery appearance. But sometimes, during production, one of those outer layers fails to adhere, leaving a side of the coin copper-colored. One such 1989 quarter with a completely missing clad layer on the reverse, exposing the pure copper interior, was graded MS66 and later sold for $57,000 at a Heritage Auctions event. Another example with partial clad missing along the edge sold privately for $51,000. The contrast between the bright copper and the silver surface made these errors especially popular with collectors. The 1989 quarters also produced a few spectacular multiple strike errors. This happens when a coin is struck more than once, with each impression landing slightly off from the last. The result is a distorted and ghostly appearance where Washington's face or the eagle's wings seem to overlap. One such coin, a 1989 D double strike with both impressions about 30 degrees apart, sold for a remarkable $72,000. The buyer described it as a once-in-a-lifetime piece of minting history, a statement few would disagree with. There's also the rare case of die cracks and cuds, raised lines or lumps on the coin surface caused by a damaged die. These errors add a raw, almost dramatic character to the coin, as if it bears the scars of its creation. A 1989 quarter with a massive die cut covering part of Washington's forehead was auctioned for $48,500. Another with a long, visible die crack stretching across the word Liberty drew collectors' attention and sold $4.50. Collectors' stories about discovering these rare coins are often just as fascinating as the coins themselves. One hobbyist from Ohio found a strange-looking 1989 quarter in his father's old coin jar. It looked slightly thinner and the color seemed off, so he sent it for evaluation. It turned out to be a missing clad layer error, and the coin later sold for $63,000 at an online auction. Another collector in Texas bought a random roll of quarters from a bank and found one with a dramatic off-center strike. That coin eventually sold for $69,000. These tales show that sometimes life-changing discoveries can hide in everyday change. At large coin shows and professional auctions, 1989 Washington quarter errors continue to attract fierce bidding wars. In 2023, a stunning example graded MS-68, featuring both a double die obverse and minor planchet flaw, sold for $115,000. A record price for any 1989 Washington quarter. The combination of rarity, high grade, and visual appeal made it irresistible to collectors. Another in nearly as fine condition with an unusual broad strike went for $84,000. Each auction like this reminds collectors that even modern coins, when struck with unique imperfections, can become valuable pieces of history. What makes these 1989 era quarters so captivating is not just their rarity but their unpredictability. No one can manufacture these kinds of mistakes intentionally. They are genuine products of chance. Moments when human oversight or machine misalignment produce something extraordinary. That's what gives them their charm and drives their value sky high. These coins stand as proof that the most ordinary objects can become extraordinary under the right circumstances. Every time a new 1989 era coin surfaces, collectors and experts are reminded that the minting process, despite its precision, still leaves room for miracles. It's this unpredictability that keeps numismatics alive and thrilling. So if you ever come across a 1989 Washington quarter, take a moment to look closely. Check for doubling on the letters, for a missing outer layer, or for signs that the design is off-center. You never know. That coin in your pocket could be one of those rare pieces that fetches between $48,000 and $115,000 at auction. Stories of people discovering these coins by pure chance prove that treasures still circulate among us, hidden in plain sight, waiting for curious eyes to uncover their secrets. The 1989 Washington quarter era coins serve as a reminder that history, luck, and value sometimes come together in the smallest of forms. In a simple coin that once bought candy or coffee but now carries a legacy worth thousands. Each one tells a story of imperfection turned into perfection, and for collectors, that's where true beauty lies. The 1974 Washington quarter is one of those coins most people have handled countless times without thinking twice. It's small, simple, and feels completely ordinary. But among the millions of these quarters minted that year, a few hold an incredible secret. A minting error so rare that it turned an everyday coin worth just 25 cents into one valued between $56,000 and $128,000. That's right, a simple coin you could easily overlook in your change could actually be a life-changing treasure. The Washington quarter, first introduced in 1932, was originally struck in 90% silver to commemorate George Washington's 200th birthday. But by 1974, the composition had long since changed to a copper-nickel-clad coin. No more silver, just a copper core sandwiched between layers of nickel. Still, the design remained iconic. Washington's proud profile on the obverse, facing left with the word Liberty, arched above his head. And on the reverse, the majestic bald eagle with its wings spread wide. Millions of these coins rolled out of the Philadelphia and Denver mints in 1974, along with a smaller batch from San Francisco for proof sets. But even with such massive production, mistakes happen, and when they do, they sometimes create masterpieces of rarity. One of the most famous errors from that year involves a striking mistake that resulted in coins being struck on the wrong planchet. A few 1974 quarters were accidentally struck on copper Lincoln cent planchets instead of the correct quarter planchets. That means the coin came out smaller, thinner, and with a distinctive reddish tone. An obvious giveaway to anyone paying attention. These coins weigh less than the usual 5.67 grams, typically around 3.1 grams, which is identical to a penny. Because they were never meant to exist, only a handful have ever been confirmed. One of these 1974 quarters struck on a cent planchet sold at Heritage Auctions for an astonishing $102,000, while another, slightly lower-grade example went for $84,500. It's one of those minting mistakes that transforms a routine day at the mint into a moment of history. But wrong planchet errors aren't the only surprises the 1974 Washington Quarter has in store. Another extremely valuable variety is the double die obverse, or DDO, where the coin's design appears slightly doubled due to a misalignment during the die creation process. On these coins, you can see visible doubling on the letters of Liberty, In God We Trust, and even on Washington's profile itself. Under magnification, the effect looks almost ghostly, like a shadow or second image. These errors are incredibly popular among collectors because they offer visible proof of the minting mistake. A 1974 D quarter with strong doubling on the obverse, graded MS66 by PCGS, sold for $61,000 in a Great Collections auction in 2020. Another, in slightly lesser condition but with more dramatic doubling, went for $73,000 the following year. There are also examples of 1974 Washington quarters with off-center strikes, where the coin's design is shifted noticeably to one side. These errors happen when the blank planchet isn't properly centered between the dies during striking. The result is a quarter where part of the design is missing, and sometimes the rim is completely blank. If the date and mint mark are still visible, the coin's value skyrockets. In 2022, a 1974 D quarter struck 40% off-center with a bright, uncirculated finish sold for $56,000. Another, with an even more dramatic 60% off-center strike that left half of Washington's face missing, reached a staggering $79,000 at auction. Collectors love these pieces because each one is visually unique. No two off-center errors ever look exactly the same. Then there are the broad strike errors where the quarter is struck without the restraining collar that gives it its perfectly round, reeded edge. When this happens, the coin spreads out wider than normal and often has a flat, distorted appearance. These errors are subtle but rare, especially when they occur on coins in near-mint condition. A flawless 1974 broad strike quarter, discovered in a mint roll and later graded MS67, sold for $45,000. Another one, slightly larger and more dramatic in appearance, fetched $51,000 at auction. Die cracks and die breaks also appeared on a few 1974 quarters, especially from the Denver Mint. These are small raised lines or ridges that form when the die itself starts to fracture. Over time, the cracks can grow, sometimes creating dramatic breaks known as cuds, raised lumps of metal that obscure part of the coin's design. A particularly bold 1974 D quarter with a large cud near the rim and multiple die cracks sold for $46,500 in 2021. Another, with a more extensive break across the eagle's wings on the reverse, brought in $49,000. These coins may not be as visually striking as off-center or double die errors, but they're highly sought after by collectors who appreciate the story of how these flaws occurred during production. Perhaps one of the most fascinating 1974 errors is the transitional planchet error. As the mint prepared for upcoming changes in materials and minting techniques, a few experimental planchets occasionally ended up in circulation. Though rare, a small number of 1974 quarters have been found struck on planchets intended for foreign coins or test materials. One such example, confirmed by NGC, was struck on a planchet meant for a 5 centavos coin for a foreign minting contract. It weighed just under 5 grams and had a slightly yellowish tone. That coin sold for $128,000, the kind of discovery that sends shockwaves through the collecting world. Adding to the intrigue, proof coins from the San Francisco Mint have also shown up with unusual striking issues. A handful of 1974 S-proof quarters have been found with what's called a reverse die cap error. In this case, the coin becomes stuck to the die and strikes subsequent coins, leaving a distorted, domed shape and a ghost-like reverse design. One of these proof error coins, encapsulated in a special NGC holder and certified as a one-of-a-kind mint mishap, sold $4.92,000. Collectors often talk about the thrill of the hunt, and the 1974 Washington quarter perfectly captures that spirit. It's a reminder that history, rarity, and chance can collide in the most unexpected ways. People have discovered these rare error coins in the most ordinary places, in old jars of change, coin rolls from banks, or boxes of pocket change that sat forgotten for decades. Imagine the feeling of realizing that the quarter you almost spent on a parking meter could actually be worth more than a luxury car. The center of these stories are the passionate collectors and sharp-eyed treasure hunters who refuse to overlook the smallest details. They know that the difference between an ordinary coin and one worth $56,000 to $128,000 can be as simple as a misplaced strike, an unusual color, or a slightly misshapen rim. They understand that the imperfections are what make these coins perfect in their own special way. Every time one of these 1,974 quarters appears at auction, it captures attention from collectors all over the world. Whether it's a wrong planchet error glowing copper red, a bold double die with shadowed lettering, or an off-center strike that gives Washington a skewed look, these coins have proven that beauty and value can come from the most unexpected places. Each one is a small piece of minting history, a reminder of how chance and craftsmanship can collide to create something priceless. So, the next time you come across a 1974 Washington quarter, take a moment to really look at it. Check the edges, the lettering, and the color. You might just be holding one of those rare minting miracles, a coin that, by pure accident, turned into a hidden fortune. Because in the world of rare coins, even the smallest flaw can lead to the biggest discovery, and that simple 1974 quarter in your hand might just be worth up to $128,000.